Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. I want to thank Reverend Carl for asking me to come out today and share a little bit of my experience with Native American heritage and how it's shown up in my life. For those who don't know much about the Lumbee tribe, my mother is full-blooded Lumbee from Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. That's Robeson County is where most of the Lumbees reside. We have a large population in Baltimore, also in Philadelphia, but the largest community is in Robeson County, North Carolina, which is southeastern North Carolina. And we are the largest tribe east of the Mississippi, and we are probably the largest tribe in the United States that's unrecognized by the federal government. We've been recognized by the state of North Carolina probably since sometime in the 1800s. Lumbee people were first observed in about 1724 by some explorers and settlers, and first thing they noticed was how different the Lumbee were from other tribes in the area. The Lumbee were definitely not like anything else they'd ever seen. This was a group of Native American people who dressed European, who had individual tracts of land that they farmed like Europeans, and they were practicing Christianity and had church houses. Now this is in 1724. So the question then arises, how did this happen? How is there this group of Native Americans who are already assimilated for the most part in 1724? So there's several different theories on how this happened. My favorite is the lost colony of Roanoke theory, and that theory is that when the lost colony went missing, when the English went back to when the English came with Sir Walter Raleigh and they settled in Roanoke, which is this day it's around the Outer Banks. It was not a good time to settle. It was late in the season for planting or anything like that, so supplies were short, and it was going to be a rough way to go for the settlers. And the local tribe of Hatteras Indians were friendly, and they helped out the settlers and they shared with the settlers, and so a lot of the settlers felt comfortable in sailing back to England for supplies. So they didn't come back for another 3 years. They sailed back, and I think it was 1587, and didn't return until 1590. And settlement was gone. There was an etching in one of the nearby trees that said Croatan, and that's the only clue they had. Besides that, everyone had vanished. So a lot of theories came up. Maybe they were slaughtered, maybe who knows what happened, but popular theory is that they migrated, because that's what the native tribes did. They didn't stay in one place. They moved with the seasons and with the food. And so from, I guess, 1590 until they were first observed in 1724, that's a lot of time to go from the Outer Banks, which was then known as Roanoke, and to the swamplands of North Carolina in Robeson County. So what happened in all that time? There's a lot of theories that the English settlers married into families of the Indians, and most likely there were other tribes that they kind of merged with. The Lumbee were known for hiding people out. The Lumbee used to hide away. They used to hide runaway slaves because the swamplands in North Carolina were very unforgiving, and a lot of Europeans just didn't go there. They wouldn't. There was no reason to go there, and they wouldn't have wanted to go there. So Lumbee hid away runaway slaves. They hid away fugitives from other tribes, and so there was a lot of mixing going on there. And for the longest time, they didn't know what to call these people. They didn't right away. They weren't known as the Lumbee people. That name didn't happen until 1953. So before 1953, we were known as Cherokee Indians, That name didn't stick. We were known as Croatan Indians, and that didn't stick. For the longest time, we were just the Indians of Robson County. And it wasn't until 1953 that the Lumbee, the way we got our name is from the lifeblood of the Lumbee people, which was the Lumber River, which runs through that area of North Carolina, and known to the indigenous people as the Lumbee River. And so that's where they took their name from, and that was finally established in 1953. So my story is that when I was growing up, my mother's full-blooded Lumbee, and my father is of German and Irish ancestry. So as you can see, I kind of present European. That's how I show up. And growing up, I never really had an issue with identity because I appeared to be full-blooded European. But what I've come to call myself is just a multicultural human being, which is what a lot of us are. So growing up, identity wasn't really an issue. We would visit my family in North Carolina at least once or twice a year. And while I was in North Carolina, I was Lumbee. The rest of the time, I was European or Caucasian. It wasn't until probably my late teens, early 20s, that I really started to have a crisis with identity. And that's because I started to study Native American history, and I started to really embrace my culture. And some of that happened because at some point in my late teens, early 20s, I finally had the courage to come out to my family that I wasn't really comfortable with Christianity. I was born and raised Christian. My mom grew up Southern Baptist. Most of the Lumbee people are Southern Baptists. So they've totally lost any indigenous ways, any cultural ceremony, any cultural rituals that they probably at some point practiced. And when I got the courage to tell my family, which most of my family is Christian, that was a hard thing to do. That was really, I was just lost. I felt adrift. I didn't know. I was like, here I am back to square one. So if I'm not Christian, what am I? So I started studying lots of different spiritualities, including Native American spirituality. But I was reading about Buddhism, I was reading about Hinduism, I was reading about Rastafarian, I was reading about voodoo, I was reading anything I could get my hands on. I have an affinity for the culture of New Orleans because I went there 9 years in a row for Jazz Fest, so that kind of stuck. And so voodoo was just, that was really interesting to me, but nothing really stuck, but the Native American practices and just the spirituality just kept coming around. It wasn't really a conscious decision, it just, my library of books on Native American spirituality just started to grow, and that's what I kept coming back to. So at some point I figured this is what I need to pursue. And the biggest thing is connection. When I think about this, I just never connected. When I would think back to my childhood, I mean, there was nothing wrong with the way I grew up. I mean, it was a great childhood. But when I started to study Native American history, I started to get a chip on my shoulder for Christianity because I would read about the negative effects that Christianity had on the Native population. And the more I read about that, the more I got this chip on my shoulder, and just how I'm reading about Native American boarding schools and what they went through, and it was just I was like, how can these people do this and sleep at night? So I really had this chip on my shoulder, and fortunately I've healed that. I think for the most part. I think it still comes up now and again, but I wanted that connection. I wanted that Blues Brothers connection of people doing backflips down the aisle and just really connecting with spirit. And I just never had that. And I was like, how can I get that? Where am I going to find that? And I didn't have that experience until the first time I did a pipe ceremony in a sweat lodge. And that's when I knew that this is what I need to pursue. This is what lights me up. And I really hope that for everyone, that we all find that, because there's all different paths to connect with spirit or to connect with your higher power. And for me, that's where it came to fruition. After my divorce, I was in an apartment and I was by myself, and I was really feeling adrift spiritually and in many ways. But something had, there was a community that I had been introduced to many years before that, which is where I did this pipe ceremony and sweat lodge. And I hadn't connected with them in several years, and I was just looking for that connection again. So I reached out to a contact in that community just to see if they were doing ceremony. And this was in the height of COVID lockdown, so everything was shut down. And I kind of figured they weren't having ceremony, but I called someone, and this woman I called, her name was Michelle, and today I refer to her as Grandmother Michelle because she's one of my teachers. When I called her, that was not what I thought I was going to be getting into. I thought I was just going to be finding out about if they're holding any events. And of course they weren't holding Sweat Lodge because, they're in an enclosed area with some hot rocks, and it wasn't really a good thing to do during the height of COVID. But we started talking, and I started sharing with her about my heritage and how I really felt called to incorporate some of the stuff in my life. And there was, I read a lot about the sacred pipe and the prayer pipe, and something was calling me that I really felt I needed to incorporate that into my life, but I didn't know how. I felt that I had read enough that I could probably intuitively come up with some kind of prayer ceremony with the pipe where it would be respectful. It would just be me by myself. I wouldn't be like doing this for the public or anything like that. It would just be my own personal practice. And so I found most people traditionally are given a pipe. When you become a pipe carrier, usually in that tradition, someone gifts you a pipe. So me, I kind of went the other way. I bought my pipe. But I researched, I found some native artisans in Arizona. And so I bought my pipe, and I was all excited to use it, but when it came, something told me just not to use it. And I don't know why, but I didn't use it. And then speaking with Grandmother Michelle, I came to find out that she was a pipe carrier. And she offered to mentor me and teach me in the ways of the sacred pipe. And so that was totally out of left field. I wasn't what I expected. I met up with her and gave her my pipe to hold on to for a while. We wrapped it in sage and sweetgrass, and she held on to it for a while until the time was right to give it back to me and start my training. So I did a year training with her on that, and now I pray with my pipe pretty much every day. So that's something that I've incorporated into my life, and it just, again, it's one of the first times that I can recall praying that really lit me up and really gave, where I felt a connection that I had never felt before. And in that time, I've also started to regularly participate in sweat lodge ceremonies. And that, again, is just, it's hard to put into words, the feeling of connection I get in doing these ceremonies. Which brings me to something I'm struggling with currently, and that's cultural appropriation. For me, it's kind of hurtful to, if anyone, to be approached in that manner, that what I'm doing might be cultural appropriation, because even though my people are all assimilated and we practice Christianity, at some point we didn't. At some point in our history, we practiced these ways. And I had to make peace with going outside of my tribe to learn these ways. And for me, that's where I feel a connection. So to be told that you can't do that because that's not part of your heritage, to me, it's really part of all human beings' heritage. We all lived very close to the earth at some point. And we had these rituals and ceremonies long before Christianity or any other spiritualities or religions were introduced. So it's sweat lodges. That type of sweating in an enclosed space like that with hot rocks is known in many cultures, not just Native American. I mean, it's in a lot of different cultures. So for me, I find I don't have that same hit with cultural appropriation as some tribes do have, and I understand that, and I want to have empathy towards that, because there are people who do these ceremonies for profit. There are people who charge you to come to ceremonies like that, and so I get that, and some of these ceremonies have not ended well for people. So I really do understand not being upset with people who do this for profit. Any of the ceremonies I've ever been to, no one was charging money. The most they asked you for was to bring a dish for the potluck after the ceremony. There may be a bowl set out for donations, but no one was charging for these ceremonies. So I feel good about that I haven't ever found myself in that situation where I was being asked to pay for a ceremony. So this kind of leads me into healing. So some of the healing I've done, which is the healing of this chip I had on my shoulder for Christianity. The Lumbee people kind of, we evolved through merging with other cultures, with other tribes, with Europeans, and even though Christianity was probably really, they probably felt pressured to convert to Christianity, really to avoid persecution and to be able to blend in with society. The Lumbee people were never forced onto reservations. They were never forced into boarding schools. When they merged with other tribes and Europeans, the natives obviously greatly outnumbered the Europeans in that little nucleus there. So they obviously converted for survival, just to blend in and not be forced onto reservations and to not be persecuted by the government and by other settlers. So I've learned to be okay with that. I mean, it's free will, and if that's what you still choose to do, I mean, to this day, most of my family are Southern Baptists. My mom had converted to the Lutheran religion because my mom was married before, and my father, who was Catholic, he was brought up Catholic. So they were both married before, and their churches would not marry them. So they converted to Lutheran so they could get married, and that's how I grew up, and that's how they're still Lutheran to this day. But there has to be forgiveness for me. I have 4 pillars of healing, 4 principles that I try to live by. Most of them are found in any spirituality that you would study, not just Native American, but you'll find it in most spiritualities. For me, connection really came from studying Native American spirituality. Connection to self, connection to the natural world, connection to other people, and connection to spirit. The other one is unconditional love, forgiveness, and gratitude. And it really warmed my heart to see the kids with the cards of gratitude this morning. That was great. One of my teachers says to always turn towards gratitude. And so that's a real big thing for me, just having that gratitude practice in my life, being grateful for every day. Unconditional love. Love for me a lot of times came with conditions. That's been my experience. And So it's important for me to not to just say love, but to put unconditional in front of it, because love with conditions just, it's I love you if, or I'll love you when. And that's not the love for me, where I feel connection. It's the love where I love you just as you are in this moment, no need to change, no need to be anything other than what you are. And that's my definition of unconditional love, and that's where I feel the greatest connection with my fellow human beings and the natural world, any winged beings, four-legged beings that crawl on their bellies. So moving from unconditional love, then we go into forgiveness. And forgiveness really starts here. It starts within. Forgiving myself for any of the judgments I've had towards other people, towards Christianity, towards other forms of spirituality that don't line up with my perspective. So that's where I try to live my life today, is unconditional love, forgiveness, gratitude, and connection. And again, most of these pillars can be found in all spiritual traditions mainly, even though connection I get from Native American spirituality, and especially connection to the natural world. That's been a really big thing in my healing. So I just want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you for listening to my ramblings, and happy Native American Heritage Month. Thank you.